the waiting thing. We can talk. Okay, I think we're live. It says
Awesome.
we're live.
L-
You can.
Liz, we're live. We're here. Welcome. Hey, everyone. This is pretty exciting. Sarah and I have never gone live before. So
Mhm.
let me introduce you to Sarah Olivieri. Um, she's the founder of Pivot Ground and has an amazing background in the nonprofit sector and an amazing heart. She wants to change the world. And that's why she does what she does. She wants to help people who want to change the world, and she wants to help people do that in a way that is more effective, that doesn't cause people to burn out. Um, and so she's developed some really amazing tools. And the reason we're going live today is because we have a training this next month. Part of our Thrive program is that we continually develop more modules and more curriculum. And Sarah likes to give those lessons live. So in May, it's a couple of weeks out here. It's coming real shortly here. We have a 4-part live training series, and the title is Streamline, Systematize, and Scale. Um, so, Sarah, welcome. Thanks for being online with me
I
today.
know, I'm
Thanks for having the
so
patience.
excited. And we're testing this new streaming software, and I'm really excited about that too.
So, hopefully, we'll do this a lot more.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, one of the biggest questions well, I guess it's just confusion. We talk a lot about scaling, and scaling is really important when it comes to growing an organization. Um, but a lot of people don't know the difference between just growing an organization and scaling. And you do a really great job of explaining what the difference is. Could you just talk to us a little bit about what is scaling and why do we want to do it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, everybody kind of knows what growing is, right? It's getting bigger and bigger. But
Mhm.
scaling is a special type of growing where the result that you're getting gets bigger and bigger and bigger, but the effort you're putting in related to that result actually isn't getting that much bigger. So if you're just growing and not thinking about scaling, you're probably going to kind of create a bigger monster on the back end of running everything along with making a bigger impact. When we
Gotcha.
scale, we essentially become more and more efficient. We can make a bigger difference for every dollar we put in or every minute that we put into running our organization. So we really want to focus on scaling, which allows us to get ultimately, it's great for two reasons. One is you can make an even bigger impact when you scale, because if you just grow without scaling, you kind of hit a plateau. I call it the Atlas plateau. It's like you're carrying the world on your shoulders. You can only grow, you can only carry so much. And when you hit that plateau, you can't grow anymore. So, one, we need to scale so that we can really make the biggest impact possible. And then the other thing is that's how we prevent burnout, right? If you're really doing it right, you shouldn't be overburdened. You shouldn't be Atlas carrying the world on their shoulders. You should
Sure.
be like, like an ant colony that's carrying something really large, right? And it's all these little ants kind of going along. You kind of,
Mhm.
not that you should be an ant, but you should be more like that. The load should be evenly distributed. You shouldn't have to I think of it, a lot of nonprofit leaders, it's like they're opening up their own veins and bleeding for their organizations. You shouldn't
Right.
have to do that. You can make an incredibly amazing impact and still get paid well and have vacations and have good work-life boundaries and all that good stuff that the for-profit sector hopefully enjoys as well, although they don't always get that.
Sure, sure. So, I mean, really, in essence, what it comes down to, even in any business, right, is that if you're going to grow, you need to do it, and you need to make sure you're scaling so that you're not overworking yourself. Um, and in order to do that, it sounds to me like you need some sort of system in place, right?
That's right.
You need to
That's right.
have systems and processes. And so that's where this training, Streamline, Systematize, and Scale, comes in. And you're going to be talking about the process of creating processes,
Mhm.
how we do that, what types of systems and um, and processes we need to have in place, and maybe evaluating those things. So this is going to be a 4-part series. And that means it's 4 different days. It's just going to be maybe half hour to an hour of training each day. But they're going to be on Tuesdays and Thursdays, May 17th, 19th, 24th, and 26th. So hopefully people can get that on their calendar now. But let's talk about the different modules. So the first module, May 17th, will be process basics. So talk to us a little bit about processes and why they're so important.
Yeah. Well, so many people, when I started talking about processes with nonprofits, I remember the first client I worked with on processes, and I'm like, we're going to set up some processes. And they're like, oh, we don't want to do that. That sounds awful. So many people have been, especially in the nonprofit sector, if you deal with the government in any way, or you're getting government funding, you've probably been exposed to a lot of bad processes. So like,
Sure.
we're going to be talking about kind of the basics around what's the difference between a good process and a bad process. If you think about processes and you go, oh, I don't want that, you've probably experienced a bad process. A good process is something you should think about. When you think about it, you should be like, oh my God, this process makes my life better. It makes the results better. It makes everything easier. I'm super happy and I love the process, right? Like that is, so we're going to be talking about the basics of how you can kind of make sure that you're having good processes and not bad processes. And there's plenty of like tips and tricks about how to do it well and how to do it better.
Sure. That's great. I can tell you from my own experience. I once inherited. I walked into a law firm and worked there, and there were a lot of processes that were either outdated, had been modified. Nonetheless, they weren't documented. There really was nothing in place anymore, and it was all in the mind of the office manager, and then the office manager was leaving. So, talk about need something.
Yeah. I love that you shared that story because it really brings up for me, like, processes aren't just about making your life easier and your work more efficient. They play into the sustainability of your organization, right? And this happens,
Absolutely.
with CEOs and executive directors. Often they have so much in their head when they leave, and this is true for lots of employees. When they leave, it costs a lot. It costs a lot of time. It costs a lot of money. Stuff goes, missing. Not like they stole it, but just like it was all in their head. And so when you have processes, then you can document them. And when they're documented, they can live on and on and on. And it makes your organization so much more sustainable. And we have a module on that, right?
Yep. So talk about the second component, the second part in our series on the 19th will be the mother process.
Yes.
I love this. It makes me think of the mothership.
The mother process is your process for making and documenting processes. It's the process for processes. And having a great master or mother process for making all the rest of your processes will save you so much time and effort. And I have to tell you, I was introduced to documenting processes without this concept of a mother process, your process for making processes. A lot of people just kind of gloss over it. And there's some really important things to know that will make or break whether or not all that, it does take some work to document your processes if you haven't done it at all. Right. And I have seen people document their processes and then have all of that work be for nothing because they don't use their documentation. That is what happens if you have a bad mother process or no mother process for how you're going to manage all these processes and how you're going to document their processes. So over the years, I've come up with a really slick, streamlined process for making processes. And in that module, I'm totally just going to give it to you and teach it to you and teach you like what mistakes to totally avoid so that you don't have to live through them like so many others have. And then, how to really make it great.
Perfect. Perfect. Well, we've kind of talked about, I mean, because this all is, it's so intertwined, but documenting process.
Yeah.
And back to my story, right? There was, there were some processes somebody had tried at some point to establish some sort of processes and kind of like a process manual for our office. Um, but, but again, maybe they started that 20 years ago, and so then they changed after a while. And so the truth is, right, we need to have a method to document.
Mm-hmm.
We need to have probably records of how things have been changed, because not everything that we try works. So
Right.
maybe we've decided to change a process and it flailed. So it's nice to have records of all of those things. So tell us a little bit more about documenting processes. Um,
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't have to go in detail. We're going to do that on the
Well, in the training,
24th.
I will teach you how to document processes, but probably what I can tell you right now,
Mhm.
without going into a full training, is the kind of mistakes I'm going to teach you to avoid and the kind of mistakes that I have seen again and again and again. So, one mistake you mentioned already is you document your processes in a way that is hard to update, and then they don't get updated. So out of date processes. There's a
Right.
very sneaky thing with processes and documentation, which is it's actually, there's kind of two sets of documentation that ultimately you need, which is the documentation that teaches somebody brand new to the process how to do it, and the
Yep.
documentation that helps somebody, like everybody, just do it the same way every time. So we're going to talk about how to manage that without making it like this overwhelming thing, right? Because if you have to write a handbook, an instruction manual for everything, in addition, that sounds like a ton of work. So I'll teach you how to do that in like a really not an overwhelming way. Another thing with documenting processes, mistake I see all the time is people document processes that aren't proven to work yet. Right. So it's actually a process that's full of flaws, or, and there's something about writing it down, right, that brings potentially a lot of clarity. But probably if I have a process and I'm like, yeah, and I just think it up out of my head and I haven't really tested it, and I write it down, and then I have like you do it,
Mhm.
you're probably going to really struggle, because in the process of writing it down, I've improved it a little, but we also need to have other people, testing to make sure that it's, that there aren't big gaps in how
Sure.
you write it down. So we're going to talk about like how to actually deal with that testing phase, and make sure
Mhm.
that you've written the process in a way that makes it accessible to other people, because that's kind of the point, right? Right.
Right.
One of the first times I realized that I really had my processes going, and in the Thrive program, we teach the impact method, which is kind of like this process. It's a whole framework of processes that go together. And
Right.
my son came home sick from school, as it happens, usually suddenly, and he had the flu, and I had to basically, at the drop of a hat, cancel my week. And
Oh.
because everything is documented, my team just did my job for me. And there was like, the couple meetings that they rescheduled that only I could take. But it was such a relief when I came back from like suddenly being gone, to not have a pile of work to do. Right. And I'm sure some of
Mhm.
you have like experienced that, when like all of a sudden you're out sick and then you come back and it's like the pile has built up. So great processes and knowing how to have your team like all using that and how it's documented means that your team can pick up your workload if anything happens, and then you avoid this kind of up and down, stop and go experience when things are a little rocky.
Right. Right. Well, perfect. Well, that brings us to, the final class, which is going to be on the 26th, which is improving process,
Mm-hmm.
which you've mentioned and we've kind of talked through here. But it is important because times change and things change, and as you grow, right, you might have a need to expand a process, or maybe to eliminate one,
Yeah.
if that's the case. Um, so talk to us just a little bit about what you're going to talk about during the improving our process
Yeah.
course.
So, as you mentioned when we first went live, like while these will become recorded trainings for Thrive participants in the future, I love teaching live, and
Mhm.
we like to do, in the live trainings, when we're doing them live, there's a workshop component that is not, that you can't really give a workshop that easily in a
Yeah.
recorded training. So especially in this session, for the workshop component, it's going to be really valuable because we're actually going to get people like testing what they've learned and then working on improving. And as you said, right, one of the benefits of building great processes and documenting processes is you can really start to make it becomes more scalable, right? How you can then improve the process because it becomes more systematic. You're changing maybe
Mhm.
one variable at a time now. You're kind of getting scientific about what you're doing.
Mhm.
And it's like, getting used to doing systems and processes actually sets you up for automations. Now, there's a
Mhm.
whole, we could probably do a whole training or a whole day on like mistakes that I've seen people make with automations. A lot of people aren't
Right.
using automations, but a lot of people have experienced bad things because they build automations to automatically run processes that aren't
Mhm.
tested or proven yet. And
Right.
then what happens is the automation just multiplies your mistakes
Yes.
like
Absolutely.
millions of times over, right?
Sure.
So, as you learn to build a better process, you can add in more automations. But of course, as you add an automation, you then need to tweak the process to make it work with automation. So we're going to kind of get a little bit into that in the last session about how you can really start to level up. But it's like you can't
Yeah.
just jump from ground zero to a fully automated business. I'll
Right.
tell you a little story. I had lots and lots of business coaches saying, like, first thing you should outsource is your bookkeeping. And
Mm.
I like bookkeeping, first of all. And I know that because I like it, and I know I'm weird that way. This is, it doesn't matter if you like it or not. But because I liked it and I did it, I realized that the value of doing your own bookkeeping is you really have a grip on how your money is working. And
Mhm.
all for profits and nonprofits have to have a great grip on how their money is working.
Right.
The reason why it was recommended to outsource this is it can be time consuming. And ultimately, I've outsourced part of my bookkeeping. But before I did that, I automated the majority of the work to the point that bookkeeping was taking me 20 to 45 minutes a month to do the work.
Oh,
Right? So
wow.
I just used systemization,
Mhm.
processes, and some automation to bring the workload that I had to do without having to outsource at all down to a really small amount of time. And so, right, so it's over time. And I didn't do that overnight, right? First, I changed how I did my filing system. Then I
Mhm.
changed, I was careful about the tool that I selected. And there were lots of decisions to make. And each time I had to, tweak my process a little bit as I
Mhm.
built these different things in. And then finally, I was at this place where, like, I can't get it down to any less unless I just start skipping bookkeeping. But I like to do it weekly,
Sure.
and then finally, and then I went years just doing it that way, and then finally I outsourced like 90% of the remaining work. So
Sure.
now my bookkeeping, in fact, I recommend that everybody unless you're, if you're a giant organization, but if you're a smaller nonprofit and you're an executive director thinking like, oh, I'm nervous about money, you should try reconciling your own accounts. And if you're the CEO of a larger organization, I recommend you get like cozy every now and then with your bookkeeper or your accounting staff and just
Mhm.
go through that reconciliation process with them, because when you reconcile your accounts, that's basically when you make sure that what you think happened and what
Happened.
the bank thinks happened, right, actually happened. It's your chance to check for mistakes. And it's the
Yeah.
part, if you get involved with just that part, you can gain so much insight into what's happening. And you might have some big surprises. And we want to catch like surprises before they come
Mhm.
and bite you in the butt, right? We talk about
Right.
proactive. So
Then they won't be surprises.
total side story about bookkeeping and being in touch with your money. But yeah, so I just improved and I improved and improved till it was taking very little time. And then I delegated.
Right.
And a lot of people will delegate first, and then maybe the process isn't very good, and then all sorts of stuff can start happening, and maybe you don't even know that it's happening, and it's not in a good way, and you can get into all sorts of problems.
Right. Right. Well, perfect. Well, I'm super excited about seeing these live trainings. Before we end this together, I do want you to talk about just briefly, because these trainings are a part of the Thrive program.
Yeah.
And so tell us just a little bit about what the Thrive program is, and how, if someone is interested in these classes coming up in a few weeks here, how they become a part of Thrive.
Yeah, awesome. So, as you might be picking up on what Allison said, you can't just join these live classes one off. This is special, something we do just for our Thrive participants. And we'll put the link in. But if you go to, is it pivotground.com/application, you can read a little bit about the Thrive program. It is a 12-month program for not just for nonprofits, where organizations, it's primarily the CEO who participates in the programming, but is really for the entire organization, learns the impact method, which will send you a free training on exactly what that is. But it is a system of processes that all are designed to work together. They're already streamlined and optimized, just like we've been talking about today, to actually, it's like an operating system to run your organization so that everything works. So, you're like, oh my God, Sarah really went to town refining her bookkeeping, right? I have actually done that, but took a little bit longer to figure out how to do that for an entire, how do you run an entire nonprofit so that it's scalable, so that it's flexible? How do we actually make the strategic planning amazing? How do we make sure that the work gets done and that it's measurable, right? We're told to do all these different things, but in reality, if you try to do them in a one-off way, it's way too much. And so you're going to learn the impact method. And then we have all these other trainings, live, pre-recorded. We have live coaching with me. It's an amazing program. It's a great community of executive directors / nonprofit CEOs. So if you're interested, you can go to that page. We'll give you some more information. You can send us some information about you by applying. There's no charge to apply. And if we agree that you are a great fit for the Thrive program, your next step will actually be to watch a masterclass for free that we're going to send you with all the information as well to the Thrive program. So if you want to join these live trainings that are coming up, you need to enroll in the Thrive program before they kick off.
Right. Perfect. Well,
Wonderful.
thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super excited. Super excited to start hearing some little dings in our inbox. So thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it. And it was fun to go live with you.
Woohoo, me too. I loved it. I hope we do it again soon.
Okay.